Okay, this week's lesson is still focusing on group communication and presentations, but we're going to talk about the systemic problem-solving process that groups need to use to effectively solve problems that they are faced with. And then we'll talk about virtual groups and how they can effectively communicate and work together in a virtual environment. So again, like I just mentioned, we're going to talk about the steps of the systemic problem-solving process. We are going to touch on how groups can communicate more effectively in virtual groups, how they're able to present their group findings in different formats, and then evaluating group dynamics and presentations. So the systemic problem-solving method is a six-step problem-solving method. To be an effective group, your group needs to follow a process for analyzing problems and coming up with a productive solution in a short amount of time. And one method to effectively do that is using this systemic problem-solving method. So number one says identify and define the problem. Even when a group is asked by like an outside agency that provides a problem that they need help with solving. So a lot of the time you have companies that will pay, I forget what they're called, but they'll contract somebody in to come and evaluate their processes and see where they can save themselves time and things like that. So outside groups might communicate a problem, and you as the group need to understand precisely what the issue is and what needs to be resolved. So questions that you need to ask are, what is the problem? What's the history that you all have been dealing with? Who's affected by this problem? And how many people are affected and to what degree? So those can really help you to identify and define the actual problem that you're trying to solve. Step number two, after you've identified and defined the actual problem, you need to analyze that problem. So most groups begin with each member sharing information about what they already know about the problem. And the group then determines what additional questions that need to be answered and search for additional information to actually answer those questions. And then that leads you into step three, determining the criteria for judging solutions. So you're going to come up with a lot of different solutions, but determining which one is the best solution, you need to have some clear criteria already set out. So group members need to discuss that specific criteria, and then they're going to start to pose their possible solutions. And, they're going to thoughtfully consider whether their solution adequately addresses the problem that was identified in step number one, and whether it's truly feasible to actually use that solution to solve the problem. Sometimes people might come up with a solution, but it's like, there's no way that we could find the money to put that solution into play, or there's just no way that we could actually make that work. So step four, you're going to generate a host of solutions. So a lot of groups tend to fail at generating a variety of possible solutions because they usually criticize the first ideas that people are sharing. And that tends to create this like discouragement for other members of, I don't want to take a risk if the rest of the group is just going to shoot down my idea. But also during this stage is when you could have some groupthink. People, like one person shares their idea and the rest of people are like, oh yeah, that sounds good. But one way to encourage input from everybody is just having a brainstorming session. So maybe have a common board that everybody can write on and share their ideas, and then collectively come together and discuss all of the solutions that were put up on the board. That way people don't have to worry about feeling rejected by the group, or if other people think their idea is stupid, it's not like they're directly saying it to them. You're able to analyze the whole group and everybody's able to share their ideas together, and then as a group go through that brainstorming process. Step number 5, you're going to evaluate the solutions based on that criteria, and then you're ultimately going to select one. So again, making sure you define clear criteria that you're going to use to judge whether or not the solution is going to help meet that problem that you've identified. And also, this is where you want to really dig in and figure out, how difficult will it be to implement this solution to solve this problem? Is it going to take a lot of time and effort and financial resources on the business's part, or is it going to be pretty cost friendly and also very effective at solving the problem that they're experiencing? Then finally, you're going to implement the agreed upon solution and assess it. So you're actually going to put the solution into play, and then you're going to start to collect data to see if it's actually solving the problem that you were hoping it would solve. So talking about who's going to carry out the different tasks to implement the solution, what's a reasonable time frame that you can implement this solution, as well as tasks required. Okay, so that was the systemic problem-solving process. We're going to move on to communicating effectively in virtual groups. So this is very fresh to you all because you're having to communicate in virtual classrooms right now. So basically, virtual groups are very common in large organizations that have multiple locations worldwide and that maybe aren't near one another, but still need to communicate with somebody in New York while they're down in Florida. You can't just hop on a plane and go there frequently. So they typically will have these virtual meetings. I have a girlfriend that works for Amazon, and she's pretty high up, and she is spending the majority of her days now on these Zoom meeting calls, having face-to-face conversations with the rest of her group members because they can't be there together in the same place. They're very popular these days because you don't have to physically be present in the room, but you can still be a part of the meeting. And members, usually on platforms such as Blackboard or Canvas, these are the platforms that universities use for online classes, but you're able to post and do your assignments at any time. So it allows you to participate over a time span and not be restricted by specific time frames. And then also virtual meetings can save money. You don't have to have a physical room to meet in. People aren't having to travel there. They're able to do them from the comfort of their home or whatever location they're in. So it's definitely cost effective. There are potentially some downsides to doing virtual groups. One of them is that virtual groups aren't as dedicated to completing the tasks assigned. Obviously, they have to be very well at self-managing and making sure that they're getting their work done and completed and submitted for the rest of the group to access. And if you have one person not completing their assignments and end of the work, then it's really going to hold up the group. So you really have to be a self-manager. If you're not doing those frequent virtual meetings or communication on a regular basis, some people might start to slack off. Also, people say that they don't foster positive relationships among the members. So these people may just communicate at that one particular time and then never interact anymore the rest of the week. I know that you really have to work at fostering that positive relationship among members so that when you do meet in face-to-face virtual meetings, that group members are interacting with one another, whether it be through a chat forum or whether they're getting on the microphone and actually sharing and discussing aloud with the group, or you have different discussion posts throughout the week that you have to engage and comment on your peers' responses. So that's another way to help with positive relationship building, but it's not done unless the leader of the group kind of encourages it. And then virtual groups have a difficult time building cohesion. They don't feel like one unit. They don't feel real connected and like a team. And that really takes some work. And the activity that you all are going to do in this lesson will help to try and, foster those positive relationships and help to build cohesion of virtual groups if that's something that you have the opportunity to participate in whenever you're in the workplace. So there's 4 guidelines. These are 4 guidelines for effective communication in virtual groups. One of them, definitely a big thing that a lot of schools dealt with once we hit this pandemic and were forced to switch to online virtual learning, is their members were not trained in the technology. So they didn't know how to use all of these online platforms to get their activities and assignments out to their students. So they kind of started panicking, like, I only know how to do paper-based teaching, and I've never been trained on how to use Google Documents or, run Google Classroom and set up activities in there. So it's really important that people are trained on the technology before they actually are asked to be thrown into one of those virtual groups. Another thing is that creating those icebreakers and team building opportunities, it's, just as important to do those things to get to know one another and build that trust among members, because since you're not interacting in a present, real life environment with one another in the same room, it's important that you're doing other activities to build that safety and get people comfortable to want to share and kind of just feel trusting of the group that they're around. And then develop group ground rules. So, you're going to have rules in normal face-to-face groups, but you also need to have rules in these virtual groups. It's expected that, if you receive an email from somebody in the group, you need to respond to that email within 24 hours. Or as people are sharing during live virtual group meetings, being courteous and respectful to the group members as they do that. As well as just, keeping personal information private within the group if sensitive information is being shared. Think before you post things. So if you're having to interact on discussion posts with one another, just be respectful and courteous with your comments and think before you actually respond with something negative. And finally on this slide, provide clear structure. So it's best to say, we are going to meet at this time every week, and there needs to be like a formal leader of the group that kind of runs the show and makes sure that the group is following along in the process and actually working together to find their solution to their problem. The final 3 guidelines for effective communication in virtual groups is to use synchronous technology if possible. That means that you are meeting at a specified time, and it's not sporadic or whenever other people want to engage with you. And these can be done, yes, you can use discussion boards, but that's still not synchronous setup that people can go on and participate in that discussion board at their own leisure. So it's better to have those opportunities where people can, regularly interact with scheduled video conferences and engage in real time, not, over the course of a week at their leisure. Create opportunities to meet outside the virtual environment. Obviously, this isn't as easily done for some groups. Definitely not right now when we're having to social distance. But I'm part of a program where it actually used to be a requirement where you did online lectures 6 out of the 8 weeks, and then 2 of the 8 weeks you actually had to go and physically meet in Frankfurt for a live lecture in person. So, having those opportunities to meet in person gives you the opportunity to feel a little bit closer to the virtual group members, start to have side conversations, or build your communication up outside of just your group and the reason that you all are together with a group. Also, another good thing is setting up instant messaging, so where you can immediately have short conversations and engage with one another between meetings, but also in real time. I know that Humana has a live instant messaging chat feature for all of their employees that they can instant message one another back and forth in real time. And then finally, schedule regular opportunities to assess the pros and cons of the technology and make adjustments as needed. So survey the group regularly to, determine if you're having any problems or if people are, having difficulty working with one another, or, the quality of the group is suffering. Having those opportunities to allow them to share their opinion and make adjustments so that you can have a more effective group. Just like Miss Heights did last week, she surveyed you all to get your opinion with how online schooling was going, and now they've shared the results, and we're going to start to make some adjustments where necessary. And that is it.